I traveled for my son's wedding, paid for my own flight, brought the family's heirloom veil, gifts, everything. But when I was at the airport, he sent me a text. Emily Johnson adjusted the strap of her carry-on bag as she made her way through the crowded terminal of the airport. At 58 years old, she had grown used to traveling alone, but this trip felt different. It carried weight, both emotional and symbolic. She had paid for her flight with her own savings, booked her own hotel, and packed carefully, bringing along not only the family's wedding veil, but also thoughtful gifts for her son and his soon-to-be wife. It had been months since she had last seen Michael in person, and despite the occasional phone calls and polite text messages, there was a silent gap between them she could not quite explain. The veil itself had been wrapped meticulously in tissue paper and sealed in a box, tucked safely between her clothes to prevent it from wrinkling. It was more than just a piece of fabric. It had been worn by Emily's grandmother, her mother, and herself on their wedding days. To Emily, it represented continuity, family, and love passed down through generations. When Michael announced his engagement to Sarah, Emily had offered it without hesitation. Sarah had smiled politely but had shown none of the warmth or enthusiasm Emily had hoped for. That had become something of a pattern with Sarah. Courteous, proper, but always keeping Emily at arm's length. From the first moment they met, there had been a chill in her demeanor, a subtle undercurrent that Emily struggled to define. Politeness masking disinterest. Still, Emily had convinced herself that these things took time. Not every relationship between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law bloomed immediately. She was determined to stay positive. She glanced at the boarding gate's digital screen. Her flight to California was still on time. As she settled into a chair and pulled her phone from her purse, she considered calling Michael again. Maybe just a quick check-in, a final confirmation of plans. But before she could tap his number, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Michael. Her breath caught as she read it. "Mom, we need to talk before you come." The words hung there on the screen, cold and sterile, without any context. Emily frowned, rereading it as if repetition might reveal some hidden clarity. What did he mean? She was already at the airport. She had been planning this trip for months. Her bags were packed. Her seat was confirmed. Her itinerary carefully planned down to the rental car. Why now? A surge of anxiety rose in her chest. She dialed Michael's number, but after a few rings, it went to voicemail. His recorded message played, casual and familiar, offering no hint of the strange tone behind his text. She hung up and stared at her phone, willing it to buzz again with an explanation. Nothing came. For a moment, Emily considered not boarding the plane. But no, that was absurd. Whatever this was, it could not be so serious as to warrant canceling her trip. Perhaps it was just wedding nerves. Cold feet. Maybe Sarah was having second thoughts and Michael needed advice. Or maybe there had been a minor logistical issue. Emily tried to calm herself with rational possibilities, but none of them seemed to fit the starkness of his message. Her heart beat a little faster as she stood when her boarding group was called. She tried texting him back. "I am already at the airport. Is everything okay?" No reply. By the time she settled into her seat on the plane, Emily's mind was racing with possibilities. Her fingers hovered over her phone as a flight attendant instructed them to switch devices to airplane mode. Reluctantly, she complied, feeling as though she was cutting herself off from any chance of immediate understanding. The flight stretched out ahead of her, silent and heavy with dread. Outside her window, the sky shifted from the dull gray of departure to the pale blue of altitude. Inside, Emily's thoughts chased themselves in circles. She replayed every recent conversation, every visit, every small interaction with Michael and Sarah. Nothing had seemed wrong. Nothing that would explain this. She thought of the gifts carefully wrapped and labeled in her suitcase. A handcrafted quilt for their home, a leather-bound journal for Michael, a delicate necklace for Sarah. Thoughtful things. Meaningful things. She had wanted to show them she cared, even if words often failed her in the face of Sarah's coolness. But now, with every passing mile between her and home, a creeping doubt began to take root. What if she was not wanted there? What if Sarah had finally said aloud what she had always seemed to imply, that Emily did not belong in their lives? or at least not in their wedding. Was this some last-minute maneuver to spare everyone discomfort by quietly pushing her aside? No, Michael would never allow that. Would he? Emily pressed her fingers to her temples, willing the growing headache to subside. She remembered the day Michael had told her about his engagement. His voice had been happy but tentative, almost apologetic. Back then, she had dismissed it as nerves. But what if it had been more than that? What if, even then, he had felt pulled in opposing directions? When the plane finally touched down, Emily's phone buzzed the moment it connected back to the network. Her heart jumped as she pulled it from her bag. Another message from Michael. Please do not come to the house. I will explain later. The words were like ice sliding down her spine. There was no warmth, no apology, only a quiet command. Stay away. Emily stared out at the runway, numb with confusion. Around her, other passengers gathered their belongings, eager to step into their destinations, their plans unfolding ahead of them like maps. Emily remained seated for a moment longer, her plans dissolving in her hands. She finally stood, moving as if through water, collecting her bag and the precious cargo it contained. She stepped into the terminal, alone among the streams of strangers reuniting with loved ones, heading toward new adventures. Emily walked slowly to the baggage claim, her mind stuck on a loop. Do not come to the house. I will explain later. Later? When was later? And why now? She pulled her suitcase from a carousel with a practiced hand and found a quiet bench to sit, trying to steady her breath. There was no one waiting for her. No welcome. No son with open arms. Only this empty seat, this gnawing uncertainty. As the minutes passed and the airport thinned, Emily made a decision. She opened her phone's browser and booked a room at a cheap hotel near the airport. It was not what she had envisioned, not the reunion she had imagined, but it was shelter, a place to think, to regroup, to figure out what came next. She checked in, carried her bag up to the modest room, and sat on the edge of the bed. The box with the veil sat untouched beside her. For the first time in years, Emily felt truly adrift. The room Emily checked into smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet, a scent that seemed to press down on her chest, tightening with every passing minute. She had left the box with the veil untouched on the small dresser beside the television, but her gaze kept flickering toward it, as though expecting it to offer her some form of answer. Of course, it remained still and silent, much like her son. Hours had passed since she had landed, and despite her messages, despite her attempts to call again, Michael had not responded. Night fell, stretching shadows across the beige walls and cheap furniture, and with it came the growing sense of unease Emily could no longer push aside. There had been no explanation, no apology, just those cold words telling her to stay away. She sat on the edge of the bed, fingers wrapped around her phone, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Behind her, the muted glow of the television played an infomercial she could not bring herself to mute or turn off, the sound filling the void that her son's silence carved deeper by the hour. Sleep did not come easily. When it did, it brought only restless fragments, half-dreams where she wandered unfamiliar streets searching for Michael's face among crowds who turned away from her with blank, indifferent stares. Morning came without relief, painting the room in a dull gray light that seemed to flatten everything it touched. She forced herself to shower, dress, and face the day with some semblance of purpose, though she had none. Breakfast was a lukewarm coffee from the hotel lobby and a muffin she barely tasted. Still, she waited. Still, she hoped for a sign that this misunderstanding would somehow resolve itself. Around 10 o'clock, her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped, but it was not Michael. It was Sarah. The message was short, clipped, devoid of warmth. Michael is very upset. Please give him space. This isn't the time for you to be involved. Emily read the words twice before the meaning settled. Involved. As if she were meddling. As if flying across the country at her own expense, bringing heirlooms and gifts, expecting to attend her only son's wedding, somehow marked her as an intruder rather than a participant. A tight knot of anger wounded itself through her chest, cutting to the layers of confusion and sadness that had weighed her down since yesterday. She typed out a reply, paused, erased it. There was nothing she could say that would change Sarah's mind. And Michael remained silent, unable to bear the four walls of the hotel any longer. Emily grabbed her bag and ventured out. The neighborhood surrounding the airport was a bland sprawl of chain restaurants, gas stations, and strip malls. She wandered aimlessly, the California sun too bright, the streets too unfamiliar. Her feet carried her without direction until she found herself seated at a plastic table outside a fast food place, a soda sweating onto the tabletop, beside her untouched. It was there that the memory returned, unbidden and sharp. The last conversation she had shared with Sarah, months ago during a dinner, when wedding plans were still new. Sarah had smiled then, polite as ever, but distant. She had said something Emily had dismissed at the time. Something about how weddings were more about presentation than sentiment these days. No one wants old traditions cluttering up their big moment, she had said, her gaze pointedly sliding over the veil Emily had mentioned. We're building something modern. Clean. No baggage. At the time, Emily had laughed politely, but now the words burned. Baggage. That was what they thought of her. That was what they thought of everything she had carried here. A relic of a past they did not want. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from an unknown number. She almost did not open it, assuming it to be a wrong number, but something about the timing gnawed at her curiosity. Here you're in town. Maybe I can help explain. Call me. The name sign at the bottom made her blink. Anna, Sarah's sister, the one she had met only briefly. During that strained family dinner when everyone had been on their best behavior, masking whatever tensions simmered beneath. Emily remembered Anna as softer, less guarded than her sister, though still very much aligned with the family's careful, curated front. Why would Anna reach out now? With nothing left to lose, Emily dialed the number. Anna answered on the first ring. Hi, Mrs. Johnson. I'm sorry if this is strange. I just thought you should hear some things. Things Michael probably won't say. Things Sarah definitely won't. Emily's throat tightened. What's going on, Anna? Why am I here if I am not welcome? Why won't my son speak to me? There was a pause, then a sigh. It's complicated. There was a huge fight last night, not just between Sarah and Michael, between Sarah's mom and, well, basically everyone. Your name came up. A lot. Emily felt her stomach drop. What do you mean, my name came up? I mean, they don't want you at the wedding. They made that clear to Michael. They think you bring tension, drama. They said the veil was a symbol of everything they're trying to leave behind. Old ideas, old expectations. Michael didn't know how to stand up to them. He's overwhelmed. Emily closed her eyes, pressing her fingers to the bridge of her nose. I am his mother. I know. I think he knows too. But Sarah's family, especially her mother, they're controlling. They have this image of what the day should look like, who should be there, what should be worn, how it should all feel. They think your presence disrupts that. They convinced Sarah. Sarah convinced Michael. Or maybe just pressured him until he gave up fighting. Emily let the silence stretch between them, feeling something inside her harden. Not anger exactly, but a resolve she had not known she still possessed. Why are you telling me this? She asked finally. Because I think it's wrong. And because I think Michael regrets it already but doesn't know how to fix it. And because you deserve to know you didn't do anything to deserve this. Emily swallowed hard. Thank you, Anna. Really. If it helps, they're not as happy as they want everyone to believe. Not as perfect, not as in control. Just think about that. The call ended, leaving Emily staring at her phone, the soda still untouched beside her. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the device down, but her mind was clearer now than it had been in days. She had come here for her son. She had brought love, tradition, gifts, things that mattered. If they did not want them, that was their choice. But she would not sit silently in a hotel room, waiting for scraps of explanation from people who did not respect her. She stood, gathered her things, and walked back toward her hotel with a new plan forming. Hours later, as the sun sank behind the flat roofs and freeway signs, there was a knock at her door. Not from housekeeping, not from management. Someone knocking with purpose. Emily opened it to find a face she had not expected to see. Her ex-husband, John. He looked older than she remembered, a little grayer, a little heavier, carrying himself with the weary posture of a man who had not slept well in weeks. His expression was apologetic, tinged with something like guilt. "I figured you'd be here," he said. "Mind if I come in?" Emily stepped aside without a word, closing the door behind him. They sat across from each other at the small table, the box with the veil between them like some silent witness to the conversation neither had thought they would ever need to have. "I got the same message you did," John said. "Not as polite, though. Sarah's mother called me herself. Told me flat out I wasn't welcome anymore. Too much history. Too many awkward questions for their perfect little day. Guess they figured it would be easier to scrub us both out." Emily felt a bitter laugh bubble up, but swallowed it down. And Michael, caught in the middle, same as always, tried to keep everyone happy, ending up miserable himself. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the air conditioner filling the space where words failed. "I came to tell you," John said finally, "this isn't about you, or even about me. It's about them controlling him. About Sarah's family rewriting the narrative to suit themselves. You being here, it ruins their story. The perfect couple with no messy baggage. No complicated ties. Just their shiny, curated life." Emily met his gaze across the table. "Then why did Michael let them?" John's mouth twisted. "Because he's scared. Scared to lose her. Scared to fight back. Scared to admit he might have made a mistake getting this far." The words settled heavily between them. "And what do we do now?" Emily asked, her voice steady despite the ache beneath it. John leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. "That's up to you. Me? I'm flying home tomorrow. Let them have their perfect day. But you came all this way. You brought that." He nodded toward the veil. "You still believe in what it stands for." Emily looked at the box, at the delicate fabric wrapped within. Love, family, legacy, things too big to be erased by someone else's discomfort. "I am not going to sit here waiting for permission to see my own son," she said quietly. "Not anymore." John nodded. Something like respect passed between them despite the years and the silence. "Then go," he said. "Make them look you in the eye. Make them tell you no to your face." And for the first time since she had arrived, Emily felt something steady take root beneath her feet. Tomorrow, she would go to Michael's house, and she would not ask permission. Emily stood at the edge of the driveway, staring at the house she had seen only in photographs. It was larger than she had expected. Too perfect in its symmetry with manicured hedges and a gleaming black door framed by spotless white trim. The kind of house that looked plucked from a brochure, where nothing out of place was tolerated, not even the people who belonged there. She felt conspicuous standing beneath the clear California sky, her suitcase handle gripped tight in one hand, the box containing the veil tucked firmly under her arm. She had not called ahead, had not sent another message. She was finished waiting for permission. The street was silent, the hum of distant traffic softened by the hedges, and walls designed to keep the world at bay. Emily's heels clicked against the smooth pavement as she approached the door. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished surface of the doorbell camera, reminding her how tired she looked, how worn down by days without sleep or answers. But beneath the exhaustion sat something steadier now, something colder. Resolve. She pressed a button and waited. No sound came from inside. A minute passed, then another. Emily rang again, this time holding the button down longer. She thought she heard footsteps beyond the door, the muffled thud of movement pausing just out of sight. Still, no one answered. Her patience snapped. She raised her hand and knocked, sharp and deliberate, the sound echoing in the still morning. At last, the door cracked open, and Michael appeared, his face drawn and pale, eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. He did not look surprised to see her. If anything, he looked resigned. "Mom," he said, voice low, strained, "you shouldn't have come." Emily's heart ached at the sight of him, but she held her ground. "I am already here, Michael. We need to talk, face to face." He hesitated, glanced over his shoulder as if expecting someone to intervene, then stepped outside, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. I can't bring you inside. Sarah's mother is here. It would just make everything worse." Emily's mouth tightened. Worse for who? For me? Or for you? Who cannot seem to tell your fiancé's family to stop treating your mother like she does not exist? Michael winced, running a hand through his hair. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple, Emily said, her voice sharper than she intended. You are my son. I came here for your wedding. I brought you things that belong to this family. To you, I am not going to be shut out like some stranger. He looked away, down at the pavement between them. I do not know how to fix this. You fix it by remembering who you are, Emily said, softer now, but no less firm. You fix it by not letting people shame you for the love you owe your family. Behind him, the door creaked, and another figure appeared. Sarah, her expression unreadable, her arms crossed over her chest as though bracing for battle. Her hair was pulled back too tightly. Her mouth set in a line that had no softness in it. What are you doing here, Emily? She asked, voice cool-clipped. I thought Michael explained everything. Emily met her gaze without flinching. He explained nothing. And since neither of you thought it worth the courtesy of speaking to me properly, I decided to come speak for myself. Sarah's eyes flicked to the box under Emily's arm. Is that the veil? It is. Sarah sighed, exasperated. We talked about this. I told Michael we wanted something new, something that fits us. Emily's fingers tightened on the box. Then you can say that to my face, not through text messages and silence. Michael shifted uncomfortably between them. Sarah, maybe we should. No, Sarah interrupted, her gaze never leaving Emily's. This is exactly what I did not want. More drama, more pressure, more guilt tripping from people who think tradition is more important than happiness. Emily's anger cooled into something sharper. You think happiness comes from pretending the people who raised you do not exist? From erasing history because it is inconvenient to your image? You may not want this veil, Sarah, but you do not get to rewrite what it means to my son. Sarah's jaw clenched. You do not understand. No, Emily said quietly. I understand perfectly. Michael exhaled, a sound of defeat. Mom, maybe you should go back to the hotel. We will talk later. I promise. Emily looked at him for a long moment, saw the exhaustion in his shoulders, the fear in his eyes. Fear not of her, but of the choice he did not want to make. Between them, between peace and truth. She set the box down gently at his feet. I brought this for you. Not her, not them. You decide what to do with it. Sarah's lips parted, a protest forming, but Emily did not wait to hear it. She turned and walked back down the driveway, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind her, the door closed with a quiet finality. She did not look back. The sun was higher now, burning against the back of her neck as she walked aimlessly down the suburban street, unsure where she was going but knowing she could not stand still. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Not from Michael. From Anna. I heard you showed up. Are you okay? Emily stared at the words, then typed back, Fine, heading back to the hotel. But fine was a lie. She was not fine. She was angry, humiliated, heartbroken in a way she had not expected. She had come all this way with hope packed between her clothes, with gifts wrapped in careful paper, with love wrapped in lace and tulle. And she had been told, in no uncertain terms, that none of it mattered here. She reached the hotel, climbed the stairs of her room, because the elevator felt too slow, too confining. She sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry, silent tears that soaked into her palms because there was no one here to see her fall apart. The hours dragged. Noon came and went. Then one, then two. She thought of calling John, but what was there to say? They had both been pushed out of the same door. They both knew what that felt like. By 3 o'clock, her phone rang again. This time it was Sarah, not a message. A call. Emily debated answering, then did. I told Michael not to bring you into this, Sarah said, skipping any greeting. You failed, Emily replied. Silence, then a breath. He is upset, more than you realize. You showing up, it is just making it harder for him. Emily's patience frayed at the edges. Then, maybe the problem is not me being here. Maybe the problem is the choices he is being forced to make. You think this is about forcing? Sarah's voice cracked a little, something vulnerable leaking through the armor. Do you know how many times he has tried to back out? How many times he has questioned this? You being here just reminds him there are still people who expect him to be someone he is not sure he wants to be anymore. Emily frowned. And who is that? Sarah laughed, a bitter sound. A son who follows the rules. A man who honors family over himself. A husband who wears someone else's history, like it is his own. You think this veil is about tradition. I think it is about chains. Emily's throat tightened. You do not get to speak for my son's heart. No, Sarah said, softer now. But neither do you. The line went dead. Emily lowered the phone, staring at it as if it might offer answers where none existed. She felt hollowed out, scraped raw by the truths she had not wanted to face. Michael was not just overwhelmed. He was lost, caught between the life he thought he should want and the one he feared choosing would disappoint everyone who had shaped him, even her. By evening, the sky bleeding into shades of pink and gold. There was a knock at her door. Not a housekeeper. Not John. Michael. He looked worse than before, like someone unraveling at the seams. Can I come in? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily stepped aside, and he entered, sitting heavily in the chair by the window, head in his hands. I do not know how to fix this, he said again. You do not have to fix it, Emily said quietly. You just have to tell the truth. He looked up, and for the first time since she arrived, she saw him not as the man Sarah wanted him to be, not as a son torn between loyalties, but as the boy she had raised, scared, uncertain, aching for clarity. Do you think I am making a mistake? He asked. The question weighted with more than just this moment. Emily crossed the room, sat across from him, took his hands in hers. I think, she said carefully, that you already know the answer. You just need someone to tell you it is okay to listen to it. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, they sat there, two people trying to hold together the pieces of something fragile and precious. Tomorrow would bring decisions. For now, there was only this, a mother, a son, and the silence finally breaking between them. The next morning, Emily woke with the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her chest. But beneath it stirred something she had not felt in days, clarity. The conversation with Michael the night before had not brought resolution, but it cracked open the door to truths neither of them had been brave enough to say aloud until now. As she dressed and tied her hair back with careful fingers, she realized this trip would not end with the wedding she had imagined. Perhaps it would not end with a wedding at all, but it could end with her knowing she had faced this mess with dignity, not retreat. The phone remained silent as she left the hotel room. No messages from Michael, none from Sarah. Emily did not expect them. She checked out without ceremony, handing over the key card with a polite nod, then pulled her small suitcase behind her toward the exit. She did not head straight to the airport. Not yet. There was one more conversation she needed to have, one more person tangled in this web who might offer her the last pieces of the truth. Anna. The address was scribbled on a slip of hotel stationery, sent by Anna late the previous night after another cautious exchange of texts. Emily had almost ignored it, weary of more half-truths and whispered warnings. But something about Anna's tone, hesitant but genuine, had convinced her to listen. The apartment complex was a far cry from the pristine neighborhood where Sarah and Michael lived. Faded paint peeled from the edges of stucco buildings and sun-bleached cars lined the narrow street. Emily climbed the stairs to the second floor, each step creaking beneath her weight. She knocked lightly on the door marked with a crooked brass number 8. Moments later, Anna answered. She looked younger in daylight, less polished than at the dinner where they first met. Dark hair pulled into a loose braid. No makeup to shield the anxiety in her eyes. She stepped aside without a word, letting Emily in. The apartment was small, cluttered with textbooks and coffee mugs and half-finished craft projects scattered across the surfaces. A life mid-transition, Emily thought, observing the moving boxes push against one wall. Anna motioned to the sagging couch, and Emily sat while she perched on the armrest across from her, fingers fidgeting with a frayed cushion seam. I am sorry, Anna said finally. I should have said something sooner. I wanted to. But it's hard with my family. You've seen what they're like. Emily nodded, folding her hands in her lap. Tell me now. Anna took a breath, steadying herself. The night before you flew in, there was a fight. A big one. My mother, Sarah, Michael. It started small, something about seating charts, of all things, but it spiraled. My mother said some things she should not have. About you, about your family, about tradition. Emily's chest tightened, but she said nothing, letting Anna continue. She said, having you, there would be a stain on the day. That people would wonder why Sarah married into a family like yours. That it would raise questions. Old money doesn't like questions, you know? Image matters more than people. Anna's voice turned bitter, eyes fixed on the floor. Sarah didn't fight it. Not really. She's been trying so hard to make this wedding perfect for my mother that she stopped seeing how unhappy Michael's been. He tried to push back. He told them he wanted you there. He said you mattered. But they twisted it. Made it sound like he was picking you over Sarah, over his future. Emily's heart ached, but she kept her expression steady. And he believed them. Anna gave a sad little shrug. He's tired. They wear you down, you know? My mother especially. She has this way of making you feel like the path she lays out is the only safe one. Question it, and suddenly you're the problem, the disappointment. Emily thought of Michael's face the night before, the hollow way he had said, I don't know how to fix this. What does Sarah really want, Anna? Does she want this wedding? Or is she just afraid of calling it off now that everything's set in motion? Anna hesitated. I think she's scared of what it means if it ends. Not just for her, but for how people will see her. Failure is an option in my family. Not publicly. My mother built this life on appearances. A broken engagement would unravel more than just plans. It would unravel her. Emily leaned back, the weight of it sinking in. So Michael is sacrificing himself to protect her image. Anna gave a slow nod. He doesn't want to hurt anyone, least of all you, but he's drowning, and no one around him will admit it's happening. Silence stretched between them, heavy with all the things neither could fix alone. Emily thought of the veil, still resting in its box at Michael's door, and felt a fierce ache of defiance swell beneath her ribs. Not anger anymore. Something older. Protection. Thank you, she said softly, for telling me the truth. Anna smiled, weary but sincere. For what it's worth, I think he's starting to see it. I think he's starting to realize he's allowed to want more than just keeping the peace. Emily rose, smoothing the front of her blouse, squaring her shoulders. Then I hope he finds the courage to act on it. She left the apartment with no clearer idea of what would happen next, but certain now of where she stood. She had not come here to watch her son disappear beneath someone else's expectations. If this ended in heartbreak, it would not be because she stayed silent. The sun hung high by the time she reached the hotel again, but Emily did not check back in. She sat in the lobby with her suitcase at her feet, watching people come and go, wondering how many of them carried burdens like hers beneath their polished exteriors. A text buzzed on her phone just after noon, this time from Michael. Can we talk? Away from the house. Emily replied simply, tell me where. They met at a small park not far from his home, a strip of green nestled between rows of suburban homes and the distant blur of highway traffic. Michael sat on a bench beneath a eucalyptus tree, twisting his wedding band, or rather, the placeholder ring he wore during fittings, between his fingers. His face was pale, his jaw tight with something like resolve. I canceled the wedding, he said, before she could even sit down. Emily's breath caught. You what? This morning. I called everyone. The venue, the caterer. Sarah, I told her I couldn't do it. Not like this. She sat beside him, her heart pounding. What did she say? She cried. She yelled. Her mother threatened me with, I don't even know what. Lawsuits? Bad press? I stopped listening after a while. He laughed, bitter and hollow. I thought I was being brave, but mostly I just feel numb. Emily laid a hand on his arm. Bravery doesn't feel like fireworks, Michael. It feels like this, like terror and relief all tangled up together. He looked at her, eyes glassy with exhaustion. I kept hearing your voice last night, telling me I had to tell the truth. that it's okay to want more. I realized I don't even know what I want yet. But it's not this, not a marriage built on someone else's rules. She squeezed his arm gently. You'll figure it out. You have time now. He nodded, slow, uncertain. I think I need to leave here for a while. Get out of this house, this city, go somewhere quiet. I was going to ask, can I come back with you? Just for a little while. Until I remember how to breathe again. Relief flooded her chest, mingled with something softer, warmer. Of course you can. You're my son. My home is your home. He smiled, a fragile thing, but real. Thank you, Mom, for showing up, for not letting them erase you. Or me. They sat there for a long while, watching the wind move through the trees, neither speaking. Around them, the world continued in its quiet, indifferent rhythm. But between them, something had shifted, a fracture beginning to heal. When they finally stood, when they walked back toward her hotel to make plans for flights and futures, Emily felt lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because they had faced it together. And because tomorrow, for the first time in months, belonged to them alone. Emily had barely begun packing the last of her things when another knock sounded at the hotel door. For a moment, she thought it might be Michael again, having second thoughts or needing reassurance. But when she opened it, it was not her son standing there. It was John, her ex-husband, the man she had not truly spoken to, face-to-face and alone, in over 5 years. He looked tired, though less disheveled than he had the last time they met. He held no suitcase, no offering of apology or reconciliation. Just stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets, like a man summoned somewhere against his better judgment. "You got a minute?" he asked. Emily hesitated only briefly. "Come in." John stepped inside, glancing around the small, impersonal room as though taking stock of her loneliness. His gaze landed on the open suitcase, the half-packed garments, the faintly rumpled sheets. She had not cried since the park. She was not about to start again now. "I heard through the grapevine the wedding's off," John said, sitting without invitation on the edge of the faded armchair near the window. Emily sat down across from him, arms crossed loosely over her chest. "That's right. Michael canceled it this morning." John nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Good." The word caught her off guard, not because she disagreed, but because it felt so unlike him to say it aloud, so unlike the man who always chose silence over conflict, who had once walked away from their marriage rather than fight to fix it. "You think so," she said. He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "I do. I've been watching this whole circus from the sidelines for months now. Figured it wasn't my place to interfere. But seeing what it's done to him, seeing what it's done to you, I should have said something sooner." "You weren't invited to," Emily said, her tone not bitter, merely factual. "None of us were." "That's no excuse for keeping quiet," John admitted. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Look, Emily, I know we don't talk much anymore. I know we made our peace with how things ended between us. But Michael, he's still ours. He's always been ours." The word struck something deep in her, something she had not realized she was holding back. She nodded, slow and deliberate. "He's coming home with me, just for a while, until he figures out what comes next." John smiled faintly. "Good. He needs you, more than he's been willing to admit." They sat in a silence that was not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. A silence shaped by shared history and mutual failure, stitched now with the quiet threads of parental concern. "Why are you really here, John?" Emily asked at last. He gave a humorless laugh. "To say goodbye, I guess, to the idea of that wedding, to the idea of Michael settling into some life that was never meant for him. I wanted to see you before I flew out tonight. Make sure you're okay." "I will be," Emily said. "We both will." John studied her, and for a moment, she wondered if he saw the same woman he had once married or someone entirely new. He did not reach for her hand. He did not offer hollow comforts. Instead, he spoke plainly, the way he never had when they were still trying to pretend they could fix what was broken. "You were always braver than me," he said. "Always the one who stayed and fought when things got hard. I should have known you wouldn't let them shut you out now." Emily felt the corners of her mouth lift, just slightly. It wasn't bravery. It was love. Sometimes that's the same thing. He stood, smoothing his jacket. Tell Michael I'm proud of him. Tell him I'll call once he's settled. And tell him I'm sorry I didn't protect him from this sooner. I'll tell him. John lingered at the door a moment longer, then offered a small nod. Safe travels, Emily. You too, John. When the door clicked shut behind him, Emily sat for a long while staring at her packed bags, at the room that had held so much confusion and heartache over the past days. She thought of the veil still waiting in its box, of the words she had spoken to Michael at the park. Not everything passed down was meant to be worn again. Some things were meant to remind us who we are. Some things were meant to remind us what not to repeat. Her phone buzzed with a new message, this time from Anna. I heard. I'm glad. Michael's lucky to have you. Emily typed back. Thank you for telling me the truth. It helped. Take care of him. I will. She turned her attention to the logistics of leaving, a flight to book, a car to return. Michael would meet her at the airport tomorrow morning. They had decided it was better this way, to put physical distance between him and the mess that still lingered in that house. Let Sarah's family untangle their own expectations without him caught in the middle. By the time night fell, Emily felt something close to peace settle in her bones. She had done all she could here. The rest belonged to Michael now, his healing, his choices, his future. She could offer him love and a place to start again. That was enough. Sleep came easier this time, deeper and undisturbed. In the morning, she woke early, dressed without ceremony, and checked out with quiet efficiency. Michael was waiting at the curb when the car pulled up, his suitcase already packed, his expression clearer than it had been in days. He climbed in beside her, offered a tired but genuine smile. Ready? As I'll ever be. They rode in silence for a while, watching the city slip past in muted colors and unfamiliar streets. At the airport, Michael paused before the security line, his hand tightening briefly on the strap of his bag. I know this isn't what you wanted when you planned this trip, he said. Emily shook her head. No, but maybe it's what we needed. He nodded, understanding. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. You never did, she said simply. The flight home felt lighter somehow, despite the weight of everything they carried. Emily watched her son sleep against the window, his features softened by exhaustion, but no longer haunted by indecision. For the first time in months, he looked young again. He looked free. When they landed, when they stepped back into the small, familiar rhythms of home, Emily knew the hardest part was not over. There would be long conversations ahead, late nights filled with doubt and hope, days when neither of them knew what came next, but they would face it together. The veil remained packed away for now, tucked into the linen closet, with a note Emily had scrawled and pinned to box's ribbon late the night before. Use when your heart is ready, not when the world expects it. Michael did not ask about it. He did not need to. As they unpacked his things, as they settled into quiet comfort of shared meals and easy silences, Emily felt the threads of her life stitching themselves into something new, not a return to the past, not a perfect future. Just this, a mother and her son, rebuilding with honesty where expectations had once threatened to ruin them both. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Emily trusted, there would be days when neither of them looked back at this moment with regret, only with the quiet gratitude of having chosen love again and again, no matter how hard it seemed. The days that followed were slower than Emily expected, not dull, not empty, but filled with a kind of quiet, necessary work. Work that had nothing to do with unpacking suitcases or arranging furniture, and everything to do with mending pieces of a life that had been frayed by months of silent doubt. Michael had settled into the guest room without hesitation, falling into the small, familiar habits of his childhood without speaking of them aloud. He brewed coffee without asking where the filters were, remembered where Emily kept the sugar even though he took his coffee black now, and folded his towels with the same neat precision she had taught him when he was 10. They did not speak much. Not at first. Words felt too fragile, too easily misunderstood. Instead, they shared space in the quiet way people who trust each other do. Emily worked in the garden most mornings, tending to the unruly tomatoes and sunflowers that had begun leaning greedily toward the sun. Michael joined her sometimes, pulling weeds without complaint, his hands moving methodically as though pulling out roots might teach him how to untangle his own. One afternoon, after several days of his quiet routine, Michael sat on the back porch with a beer he had retrieved from the fridge without asking permission, watching the sky turn from soft blue to dusky lavender. Emily brought out a second bottle, untouched by either of them, and set it on the table between them. "I called John," Michael said, not looking at her. Emily's hands paused over the tray she had been wiping down. "How did that go?" "Better than I thought. Worse than I hoped. I told him everything. About Sarah, about the wedding, about you showing up and not letting me hide from it anymore." He turned the bottle slowly in his hands. He said he was proud of me, said he wished he'd had half my courage when he was my age. Emily sat down across from him. "Your father's made peace with his regrets. That's more than some men manage." Michael gave a soft, humorless laugh. He said something else, that he thinks I got the best parts of both of you. Your spine, his stubbornness. I'm not sure I see the difference. Neither did he. They sat for a while, the sound of the neighborhood washing over them, a dog barking distantly, the low hum of a lawnmower being pushed somewhere down the street, the metallic shriek of a child's laughter cutting across the early evening calm. Normal life, untouched by the chaos they had left behind. "I don't know what comes next," Michael admitted. "I'm 34 years old, and I have no job lined up, no apartment, no fiancé, no plan." Emily took a sip from her bottle. "You have time, and you're not alone." "Yeah," he said, quieter now. "I know." The next morning brought rain, soft and steady against the windows, a welcome reprieve from the relentless heat of late summer. Emily found Michael at the kitchen table, flipping through the local paper like it held secrets instead of dated headlines and discount ads. A notebook sat open beside him, blank except for a list written in his neat, deliberate handwriting. Things I might want to do. He had written it without irony, without apology, and that alone felt like progress. Below the heading were scattered ideas, some practical, some wistful. Teach again. Right? Travel somewhere without a return ticket. Learn to bake bread. Emily smiled at the last one. "You always did like carbs," she said, sliding a cup of coffee across to him. He smiled, sheepish. "Figure I should start somewhere." "Starting is the hardest part," she said. "The rest is just persistence." They spent the day indoors, moving through small, ordinary tasks that felt more meaningful now than they had before. Sorting through old books, organizing boxes of childhood trophies and photographs, laughing at the absurdity of keeping a spelling bee ribbon from second grade. Michael found an old journal he kept briefly in high school, filled with grand declarations of what his future would look like, none of which had come remotely true. "I thought I'd be married by 25, he said, thumbing through pages yellow by time. "Kids by 30. House, career, the whole checklist. Guess I'm behind." "There's no clock for happiness," Emily said. "No one's keeping score but you." He nodded, closed the journal, and set it aside. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Michael sat alone in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. He picked up the phone more than once, scrolling through contacts he no longer had reason to call, deleting drafts of messages he would never send. His finger hovered over Sarah's name, but he did not press it. Not anymore. Instead, he opened a blank email and addressed it to himself. A letter not to be sent, not to be answered, but to be written all the same. "I almost married someone because I was afraid of what it would mean if I didn't. I almost became a version of myself I wouldn't have recognized 5 years from now. Thank you for stopping me. Thank you for reminding me that love isn't supposed to feel like erasure." He hit save and closed the laptop. Some truths were enough just to be written. In the weeks that followed, Michael found a rhythm again. Not a job yet, not a purpose carved in stone, but motion. He reconnected with friends from high school, people he had once laughed with over cheap beer and late-night bonfires, people who had grown into quieter versions of themselves, but who still welcomed him back without question. He helped repaint the local community center where he had played basketball as a boy, spent afternoons volunteering at the library shelving books he might one day read. He drove out to the lake with a thermos of coffee and sat for hours watching the water move, learning the art of stillness without regret. Emily watched all this with quiet pride she did not voice. She baked more often, left bread cooling on the counter without fanfare, planted herbs on the windowsill that Michael sometimes tended without being asked. Their conversations deepened, widened, stretched into corners of memory they had never explored together before. One evening, as they washed dishes side by side, Michael spoke without preamble. "I think I want to stay here a while. Not just until I figure things out. I mean really stay. Make this home again." Emily handed him a plate to dry. "I like that. I know I need to find work. And maybe my own place eventually. But this feels like where I'm supposed to start over. Not out there trying to prove something. Here, with you. There's no rush," she said. "The world will wait for you to be ready." He smiled, setting the plate aside. "I don't think I've said it enough. Thank you, Mom, for everything. For bringing me back when I didn't even know I needed to come home." "You'll say it when you're ready," she said. "And until then, I'll bake bread." They laughed together, the sound easy and full. Late that night, Emily found herself standing in front of the closet where she had placed a veil, the box now nestled beneath blankets and spare linens. She pulled it out, traced the ribbon where her note still hung, and wondered who might wear it someday. Not Sarah. Not now. But someone perhaps. Or perhaps not. Perhaps it would remain folded and untouched, not as a relic of what had been lost, but as a reminder of what had been reclaimed. Love. Family. Choice. When she returned the box to its place, she felt no sadness, only a quiet satisfaction. Some legacies were not meant to be worn. Some were meant simply to be kept safe, waiting for the right hands, the right heart. Downstairs, Michael had left the kitchen light on, a small beacon against the dark. Emily smiled and switched it off before heading up to bed. The late September sun hung lower in the sky each day, casting longer shadows over the streets where Michael now found himself walking with unfamiliar freedom. It had been nearly 3 weeks since he returned to his mother's home. 3 weeks of silence from Sarah, from her mother, from anyone connected to the life he had so abruptly abandoned. In that time, he had begun to remember who he was beneath the weight of expectations he had carried too long. Yet even in this newfound calm, there remained one place he had avoided, one confrontation he knew could not be postponed forever. The house, the one he had shared, however briefly, with Sarah. The house where furniture had been chosen without his input, where art hung on the walls because it matched palates, not preferences. The house where his name was on the lease, but his presence had always felt temporary. It sat only a mile from where he now walked, past manicured lawns and orderly hedgerows, the neighborhood arranged in neat repetition, as though lives could be constructed like blueprints and followed to predictable conclusions. He did not tell his mother where he was going, not because he feared her judgment. Emily had made it clear she trusted him to make his choices now, but because this was something he needed to face alone. He carried no plan, no speech prepared for what he might find, only the quiet certainty that closure was not something others handed to you. It was something you went out and claimed for yourself. The house appeared unchanged, its shutters angled just so, the porch light already glowing though dusk had barely settled. Michael paused at the gate, hand resting on the latch, breath steadying in his chest. He had a key still, somewhere in the depths of his belongings now packed away in his mother's guest room, but he would not use it. That chapter had closed. He would knock. If Sarah answered, so be it. If she did not, then that too would speak volumes. He stepped through the gate, up the short path to the door where his hand hovered briefly before forming a fist. 3 knocks, not too loud, not too soft. The sound echoed through the wood, into the quiet beyond. For a moment, nothing. Then footsteps. Slow, reluctant. The door opened halfway. Sarah stood there, hair pulled back in a loose knot, her face thinner than he remembered, her eyes rimmed with fatigue that mirrored his own. She wore no makeup, no armor of carefully chosen words or curated expressions. Just Sarah, as raw and uncertain as he felt. "Michael," she said, and his name in her mouth sounded foreign. like a relic from a language they no longer spoke. "Hi," he said. "I didn't come to fight or ask for explanations. I just needed to see it one more time, to say goodbye properly." Her lips pressed together in something between understanding and sorrow. "You don't owe me that." "I know," he said, "but I owe it to myself." She stepped aside without invitation, but without resistance either. He crossed the threshold slowly, noting how little had changed. The vase on the entryway table still held artificial flowers. The rug still lay precisely centered beneath the hall mirror. It looked untouched, as though time itself had paused here the moment he left. "I haven't been sleeping here," Sarah said quietly. "I've been at my sister's. I didn't think you'd come back." "I'm not coming back. Not like that." He turned to her. "I don't regret leaving. I just needed to see it to believe it's really over." She nodded, arms crossing over her chest as though holding herself together. "You're different." "So are you." They stood in the living room, where the couch had been chosen for aesthetics over comfort, where the coffee table bore the faint ring of coasters never used. Michael looked around, searching for some imprint of himself, something he had left behind beyond the furniture and the lease. There was nothing. "I brought the veil back," he said after a moment, his words surprising even himself. Sarah blinked. "What?" "My mother's veil. I left it on the doorstep. I don't expect you to keep it. Just don't throw it away. It doesn't belong to you, or to me anymore. It belongs to the history we thought we were part of. Let it rest where it can't hurt anyone." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "I'm sorry, Michael, for everything, for letting me make you feel like you had to choose between loving me and being yourself." He shook his head gently. "You didn't make me. I let it happen. I thought love meant compromise. I forgot that it doesn't mean erasure." Tears welled, unfallen. "You'll be okay," she said, and for the first time, he believed she meant it not as dismissal, but as hope. "So will you," he said. He didn't stay. There was no need. He stepped outside again, the door closing softly behind him, the house shrinking in significance with each step he took away from it. When he reached the sidewalk, he exhaled fully for the first time in weeks. Closure wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet and heavy and necessary. At home, Emily waited with 2 cups of tea on the table, as though she had known where he'd gone all along. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. "It's done," Michael said. "Good," she replied, handing him a cup. They drank in silence, steam curling between them, a bridge built on nothing more complicated than presence. Outside, rain began again, soft against the windows, washing clean the remnants of days better left behind. Later that night, Michael found himself standing beneath the old oak in the backyard, the one he climbed as a boy, the one that had seemed impossibly tall until he grew taller still. He leaned against its rough bark, grounding himself in the texture of something that had endured storms long before either of them had words for weathering. He thought of futures now, not the ones drawn in careful lines with dates and milestones, but the ones built slowly, organically, like roots finding their way through stubborn earth. He would stay here, for a while, maybe longer. He would work, not to impress, but to contribute. He would live, not for appearances, but for the quiet satisfaction of days spent without apology. And someday he would love again, differently, better, but not yet. Behind him, the porch light glowed steady, a beacon, a promise, a home. Inside, his mother had left the light on. She always had, even before he knew he needed it. He smiled, stepped back into the warmth waiting for him, and closed the door on the night. The first days after Michael's visit to the house passed in an almost surreal quiet, as though the world itself recognized the importance of giving him space. Emily watched him move through the routines of daily life with an ease she had not seen in years. There were fewer pauses now, fewer silences filled with the weight of unspoken regret. Yet beneath the surface of a steadier exterior, she could still sense the echo of doubt trailing behind him like a shadow he could not quite shake. It came in small ways. The moments when he lingered too long in front of the mail slot, sorting through envelopes addressed to names and places he no longer belonged. The way he sometimes stared at his phone as though waiting for it to ring, though both of them knew no one from that life would be calling. The careful way he avoided questions about the future, answering with vague promises of soon, eventually, when I figured things out. Emily let him have his silences. She understood now that healing was not a straight path, but a slow unraveling of habits built in fear. Still, as the days stretched into a week, she began to wonder if her presence alone was enough to keep him moving forward. There were limits to how much a mother could guide her grown son, even one who had come home to mend. On a gray Thursday afternoon, as rain painted the windows with soft streaks, Emily found herself sitting across from Michael at the kitchen table, a crossword puzzle open between them. He filled in words mechanically, pen tapping against the paper as though marking time rather than answers. "Are you going to visit anyone else while you're here?" she asked, her tone light, as though inquiring about the weather. He glanced up, surprise flickering across his face before settling into something more thoughtful. "Who would I visit?" "Friends, old teachers, the people who used to matter to you before everything started feeling like an obligation." She sipped her tea. Sometimes going forward means looking back without bitterness. He smiled faintly. "That sounds like something from one of your books." "It probably is, but it doesn't make it less true." Michael set down his pen, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know if I want to see anyone. I feel like I've forgotten how to answer the kind of questions they'd ask. What are you doing now? Where are you living? Are you still getting married?" The answer to all of them would sound like failure. Emily met his gaze evenly. Or like freedom. He did not answer right away. Instead, he turned the pen between his fingers, watching the slow rotation as though it held secrets he could not yet decode. "I heard from Sarah." The admission landed without drama, but it carried weight all the same. She wanted to know if I was okay. Said she's sorry for how things ended. That she didn't know how much pressure she was putting on me until it was too late. Emily kept her expression neutral. "And how did that make you feel?" "Relieved, I guess, that she can see it now. That maybe it wasn't all just in my head." He sighed. "But it doesn't change anything. I don't want to go back. I don't want to fix something that was never really whole." "That's the right answer," Emily said softly. "But it's okay if you still need to hear it from someone else." He looked at her then, really looked, as though seeing for the first time the woman who had carried him through so many silent storms. "I think I just did." The rain eased by evening, leaving the air clean and cool. Michael stood at the back door, watching the garden darken beneath the clouds. Emily joined him without speaking, their silhouettes framed in the glass like a portrait of stillness. "I keep thinking about the last year," he said after a while. "About how much of it I spent trying to make everyone else happy. About how easy it was to confuse approval for love." "It's a common mistake," Emily said, "and not just at your age." He gave a short laugh. "You make it sound like I'm still a boy." "You're still my boy. That doesn't change with years or choices." He leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "You think I'll ever stop feeling like I failed?" Emily considered her answer carefully. "I think failure is just a name we give to lessons we didn't want to learn. You didn't fail, Michael. You grew. You saw what wasn't right for you, and you walked away. That's not failure. That's courage." He nodded, absorbing the words without protest. "I want to believe that." "Then give yourself permission." They stood there until the porch light flickered on, casting soft gold over the wet grass. It reminded Emily of nights long ago, when Michael was small and frightened in the dark, and she had left the light burning not for practicality, but for comfort. Some things, it seemed, never stopped being needed. The next day brought an unexpected letter. Not from Sarah. Not from anyone Michael recognized at first glance. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, slanted and precise. He opened it with cautious fingers, unfolding a single sheet of stationery embossed with a name he had not thought of in years. Mrs. Cartwright, his old literature teacher. The letter was brief, a response to an email he barely remembered sending months ago when he thought reconnecting with his past might offer some sense of direction. She thanked him for reaching out, expressed her pride in the man he had become, and included an invitation to visit if he found himself back in town. "You always had a voice worth hearing," she wrote. "Don't let it get lost in the noise of other people's expectations." He read the letter twice, then handed it to his mother without a word. Emily smiled as she traced a neat script with her thumb. "She was always one of the good ones," she said. Michael folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into its envelope. "Maybe it's time I took you up on your advice." "Which one?" "I've given you a lot lately." "The one about looking back, without bitterness." Emily nodded. "Go. See what's still there. See what's changed. Sometimes closure doesn't come from doors closing behind us, but from opening them again with new eyes." He packed lightly. Just a small bag, a notebook, and the letter tucked safely inside. Emily drove him to the train station, neither of them speaking much on the ride. There was nothing left to explain, only the quiet understanding that this was another step forward, however small. At the platform, Michael hugged her with more strength than he usually showed, as though anchoring himself before letting go again. "I'll only be gone a few days," he said. "I know, but take as long as you need." "I will, and thank you for everything, for bringing me home, for letting me leave again." Emily smiled. That's what home is for. She watched the train pull away, watched until the last car disappeared beyond the curve of the tracks. Only then did she turn back toward the parking lot, her steps unhurried, her heart steady. Michael would return. Change, perhaps. Lighter, she hoped, but he would return. And when he did, the porch light would be waiting, burning against the dark, just as it always had. Michael returned home on a warm afternoon in early October. The train ride behind him and the letter from Mrs. Cartwright tucked safely in his jacket pocket. The few days away had offered him quiet moments of reflection, reconnection with parts of himself long buried beneath the pressures and expectations that had governed his life for so long. He felt different, not entirely whole, but no longer fractured beyond repair. Emily was waiting on the porch, a pot of freshly brewed coffee on the table beside her, the gentle hum of the neighborhood settling around them. She smiled as he stepped up the walk, the familiar silhouette framed by golden light. He returned her smile with a tired but genuine one of his own. "Welcome home," she said simply. Michael lowered his bag to the porch floor and sank into the chair across from her. "Thank you," he replied, "for being here." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes only after long days spent rebuilding trust. Emily poured 2 cups of coffee, handing one to him with a careful grace. "So," she said, stirring her cup thoughtfully, "what did you find out while you were gone?" Michael took a sip, savoring the bitter warmth. "More than I expected, more than I thought I needed." He paused, then spoke slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. "I realized that I had been living according to everyone else's script for so long that I forgot to write my own." Emily nodded. "That's the hardest part, figuring out how to tell your own story when the voices around you are so loud." Michael leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the steam rising from the cup. "I think I'm ready to start writing mine, but I'm scared. Scared of making mistakes, scared of disappointing people, scared of not knowing what the ending will look like." Emily reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Everyone is scared when they start something new. The difference is having someone who believes in you no matter what." He looked up at her, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Do you believe in me?" "Always." Michael's smile softened, and for a moment, the years of tension and uncertainty melted away. Then he asked a question he had been avoiding since his return. "Mama, do you think I'm making a mistake?" Emily's breath caught. The question was simple, but the weight behind it was immense. She searched his face, seeing the vulnerability, the hope, the fear all wrapped together. "No," she said firmly. "I don't think you're making a mistake. I think you're finally making a choice that belongs to you." He exhaled slowly, relief and doubt mingling. "But what if I'm wrong? What if I regret walking away from everything Sarah and her family built, from the life I thought I wanted?" "That's part of the journey," Emily said gently. "You won't know until you live it, but you owe it to yourself to try." Michael nodded, the tension easing from his shoulders. "Thank you, Mama, for coming here, for staying, for not giving up on me." She squeezed his hand. "I'll never give up on you. That's what mothers do." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky painted with shades of orange and purple. Outside, The neighborhood settled into evening quiet. But inside, something new was beginning. A conversation, a promise, a hope. Over the next weeks, Michael began taking steps to rebuild his life on his terms. He enrolled in a writing workshop recommended by Mrs. Cartwright, tentatively reached out to friends he had lost touch with, and started volunteering at a local community center, teaching creative writing to teenagers. Emily watched with pride as he found joy in small victories, the praise from a workshop instructor, a heartfelt thank you from a student, the simple satisfaction of crafting a story that felt true. One afternoon, while they were tending the garden together, Michael surprised her with a question that lingered beneath the surface of his growing confidence. "Mom, what was your wedding like?" Emily paused, brushing dirt from her hands. "Simple, quiet, not perfect by any means, but it was ours. What was it like to wear the veil?" She smiled softly, the memory warm. "It felt like I was carrying all the love and hopes of the women who came before me. A reminder that marriage isn't just about two people. It's about family, history, and choosing love every day." Michael looked thoughtful. "Do you think I'll ever find someone who understands that? Who wants to wear that veil for the right reasons?" Emily met his gaze, steady and sure. "You will, when the time is right. And until then, the veil is yours, not as a burden, but as a symbol of love that waits for no schedule." He nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting. "I like that." That evening, as Michael wrote his journal by the kitchen window, Emily watched from across the room, feeling a quiet sense of peace settle around them. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with questions and challenges they could not yet foresee. But for the first time in a long time, they were facing it together, without fear, without regret. As she prepared for bed, Emily glanced toward a linen closet where the veil was carefully stored, the small note she had pinned to it still visible. "Use when your heart is ready, not when the world expects it." She whispered a silent prayer that Michael would find his readiness in his own time, guided not by tradition or pressure, but by love, true, honest, and free. And with that hope nestled deep in her heart, Emily turned off the light and closed her eyes, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. A few weeks had passed since Michael returned from his short trip, and the rhythm of life at Emily's home settled into a comforting, if tentative, pattern. Michael was slowly finding his footing, engaging more with the world around him and less with the shadows of the past. He was learning to breathe without the weight of other people's expectations pressing on his chest. Though the journey was far from over, on a crisp autumn morning, Emily was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and froze. It was Michael, but the voice on the other end was not her son's. "Mrs. Johnson?" the caller asked hesitantly. "This is Margaret, Sarah's mother." Emily's heart skipped. She took a steadying breath. "Yes, this is she." There was a pause. Then Margaret continued, her tone carefully measured. "I'm calling to speak with Michael. It's important." Emily's mind raced. She wasn't sure if she should connect the call or shield Michael from whatever storm might be coming. But something in Margaret's voice, a fragility beneath the usual coldness, made her pause. "May I ask what this is regarding?" Emily said. "Only that it's time," Margaret replied. "I want to explain to make amends." Emily hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll find him." She ended the call and went searching for Michael, who was in the guest room with his notebook open on the desk, scribbling words as he had done every day since he returned. She knocked lightly before entering. "Michael," she said gently, "your future mother-in-law called. She wants to speak with you." Michael looked up, surprise and hesitation flickering across his face. "Margaret? Why now?" Emily shrugged. She said she wanted to make amends. To explain, he rubbed his hands over his face, then nodded, put her through. Taking the phone, Michael spoke quietly at first, his voice cautious but curious. Emily sat nearby, listening as the conversation unfolded. "Michael, I owe you an apology," Margaret began, "for the way things were handled, for the pressure Sarah and I put on you both. It was wrong. I see that now." Michael's response was measured. "Thank you for saying that. It was hard, but I think it was necessary." Margaret sighed. "It's taken me time to understand, but I realized I was more concerned with appearances than with your happiness." I want you to know that I regret that deeply." Emily glanced at Michael, who was silent for a moment, then spoke again. "I appreciate your honesty. I'm still figuring out what I want, who I am, but I'm grateful to hear this." The conversation continued, a tentative bridge being built over months of tension and hurt. By the time they hung up, something had shifted, not a resolution, but the possibility of one. After the call, Michael turned to Emily, a mixture of relief and exhaustion on his face. That was unexpected. She smiled softly. "Sometimes people surprise us." Days passed, and the mood in the house lightened, though the future remained uncertain. Emily watched as Michael wrote more frequently, spoke more openly, and began to make plans, not just for his own life, but for the healing of fractured relationships. One evening, over dinner, Michael surprised her with a question she had not expected. "Mom, do you think Sarah and I could be friends? Or is it too late?" Emily considered the question carefully, recognizing the complexity beneath it. "It's never too late to try," she said, "but it has to be on your terms, not theirs." He nodded thoughtfully. "I want that. I want to find peace, even if we don't end up together." "That's wise," Emily agreed. "Sometimes, forgiveness is the first step to freedom." As the days turned cooler and the leaves outside began to turn golden, Emily felt hope stirring more steadily than it had in months. The path ahead was still winding, with unknown turns and challenges, but for the first time, it was theirs to choose. Michael was learning that life was not about fulfilling others' expectations, but about creating a story true to himself. And Emily, watching him grow, knew that sometimes the most important journeys were the ones that led us back to who we were meant to be all along. After Michael's return, life at Emily's house began to take on a new rhythm, one that was neither hurried nor burdened by past expectations. The quiet hum of the small town where Emily had lived for years seemed to cradle them both, offering a gentle backdrop to healing that neither had anticipated when the trip to California first began. Michael, once weighed down by the pressure to conform, was rediscovering a self that had been buried beneath the heavy layers of obligation. One morning, Emily woke to the sound of birdsong filtering through the open window. The air smelled fresh and crisp, a clear sign that autumn had finally taken hold. She dressed quickly and headed downstairs, where she found Michael already in the kitchen, quietly brewing coffee. The small moments like this, the unspoken routines they shared, felt like anchors in a world that had been spinning too fast for far too long. He looked up as she entered, offering a smile that reached his eyes. "Morning, Mom." "Morning," she replied, pouring herself a cup. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in a while," he said, taking a sip and savoring the warmth. They moved through the morning in companionable silence, the kind that comes from comfort rather than avoidance. Later, after breakfast, Michael mentioned a group he'd been spending time with, friend from his old neighborhood. The kind of people who had known him before his life had become a series of carefully measured steps. "They've been good for me," he said, reminding me who I was before all the noise. Emily nodded. "Sometimes it takes going back to move forward." That afternoon, they decided to visit a local community center, where Michael had signed up to volunteer. The building buzzed with activity. Children playing, adults chatting, the faint smell of freshly painted walls. Michael greeted several familiar faces, some from his past, others new to him. Emily watched with pride as he immersed himself, laughing freely and offering help with a quiet confidence she hadn't seen in months. One afternoon, as they were leaving, Michael stopped by a small bulletin board covered with flyers. He pointed to a poster advertising a writing workshop led by a retired professor from the nearby university. "I think I'll sign up," he said. "Maybe it's time to put some of these stories down on paper." Emily smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea." Over the following weeks, Michael's days filled with new experiences, learning, teaching, reconnecting. He shared his progress with Emily in the evenings, reading aloud passages from his journal or ideas for a story he was crafting. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond the surface to explore hopes, fears, and the uncertain future that lay ahead. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of pink and gold, Michael turned to Emily with a serious expression. "Mom, Do you ever wonder if people can really change? If they can leave their past behind? Emily took a moment to consider. I believe change is possible, but it requires honesty and courage. It's not easy, and sometimes it means forgiving others and ourselves. He nodded thoughtfully. I'm trying to be honest now, with myself and with others. She reached over, squeezing his hand gently. That's the bravest thing you can do. Later that week, a letter arrived from Michael. It was from Sarah. The envelope was simple, unadorned, but the handwriting unmistakable. Emily watched as Michael carefully opened it, his face unreadable as he read. When he finished, he looked up. She's sorry, he said quietly. Says she wishes things had been different, that she never wanted to hurt me. Emily nodded. People make mistakes. What matters is what we do after. Michael folded the letter thoughtfully. I want to believe that we can find a way to be in each other's lives again. Maybe not as we planned, but as something new. That's hope, Emily said. And hope is powerful. As autumn deepened, the leaves turning fiery reds and oranges, Michael and Emily continued to build a life rooted in authenticity. They celebrated small victories. A story completed. A new friendship formed, a moment of laughter shared without fear. Emily often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The pain, the misunderstandings, the quiet moments of reckoning. She understood now that the veil she had brought, once a symbol of tradition and expectation, had become something else entirely. It was a reminder that love was not about conforming to a script, but about embracing the messy, beautiful truth of being human. One evening, as Michael prepared to leave for a writing retreat outstate, he paused in the doorway, a small bag slung over his shoulder. Thank you, Mom, he said sincerely, for everything. Emily smiled, her heart full. Always. He hesitated, then added, I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to find out. With that, he stepped out into the cool night, the stars bright overhead, and Emily watched him go, knowing that whatever came next, they had already weathered the hardest storms together. The house was quieter now, but the light on the porch remained burning, steady and warm, a beacon for all the journeys yet to come. Weeks after Michael left for his writing retreat, Emily found herself enveloped in a stillness that both comforted and unsettled her. The house, once filled with the sound of his tentative steps and quiet conversations, now echoed with silence. Yet she kept the porch light burning, a small beacon against the encroaching darkness, a reminder that some connections, no matter how fragile, endured. One afternoon, as Emily sorted through the mail piled on the kitchen counter, her fingers brushed against an envelope that caught her attention immediately. The paper was soft and cream-colored, the handwriting elegant and familiar. Her heart tightened when she saw the return address. It was from Sarah. Emily hesitated, then carefully opened the letter, unfolding the sheet with reverence. As she read, a mixture of emotions swirled within her. Regret, apology, hope, and something softer, almost like a bridge being extended across a vast gulf. Sarah's words were honest and unguarded. Dear Mrs. Johnson, I have thought long and hard about everything that has happened over these past months. I realize now how much I hurt Michael, and you, for that, I am deeply sorry. I was so focused on appearances, on what others expected, that I lost sight of what really matters: love, truth, and family. I see now that the veil you brought was never just a piece of fabric, but a symbol of something far greater. I hope you can forgive me for pushing you away, for allowing fear and pride to dictate my actions. I am not sure what the future holds, but I want you to know that I hold no ill will towards you. Please keep the veil safe. Perhaps one day it will be worn by someone who truly understands its meaning, not as a weight, but as a blessing, with sincere hopes for healing. Sarah. Emily folded the letter carefully, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. She sat in the quiet kitchen, the weight of Sarah's words settling over her like a gentle embrace. This letter was not just an apology. It was a turning point, a step toward mending the fractured ties that had threatened to unravel them all. She called Michael immediately, her voice trembling with a mix of joy and relief. Michael, she said softly, Sarah wrote, she's sorry. She wants you to know she never meant to hurt you. There was silence on the other end. Then his voice, cautious but touched with hope. That's unexpected, but good. I'm glad. Emily smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in months. I think this means something. Maybe it's time to start building bridges, even if they're small at first. Michael agreed, the conversation stretching long into the evening as they shared memories, fears, and plans for the future. It was not a reunion, not yet, but it was progress, a tentative step toward understanding and perhaps forgiveness. Days later, Emily found herself sitting by the window with a box that held the family veil. She ran her fingers over the delicate lace and silk, feeling the history woven into every stitch. With a gentle hand, she added a small note she had written herself, attaching it to the ribbon securing the box. Use when your heart is ready, not when the world demands it. She placed the box carefully back in the linen closet, a symbol not of endings but of new beginnings. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with challenges and choices yet to be made. But for the first time, Emily felt a quiet confidence that love, true love, was not about perfection or tradition alone. It was about grace, understanding, and the courage to forgive. And as the autumn leaves turned gold outside, Emily knew that sometimes the most important journeys were those that brought us back to where we started, but with new eyes and open hearts. The veil, once a source of tension, had become a beacon of hope. And in that hope, a family began to heal. Winter arrived softly, dusting the small town with a delicate layer of frost that sparkled beneath the morning sun. Emily's home, once heavy with tension and unspoken words, now echoed with a quiet sense of renewal. The porch light continued to glow each night, a steadfast symbol of the love and hope that had weathered storms both literal and emotional. Michael returned from his writing retreat, carrying a calmness that was new to him. He had spent those weeks surrounded by strangers who became friends, by stories that challenged him, and by quiet moments of self-reflection that helped him piece together the fragments of his scattered identity. He was no longer the man who had flown across the country burdened with doubt and obligation. He was a man beginning to claim his own narrative. His first morning back, he greeted Emily with a smile that reached his eyes, and she knew the journey was far from over, but they were walking it together, step by steady step. Michael's days were now filled with writing workshops, volunteering, and tentative plans for the future that felt less like obligations and more like opportunities. He had started meeting people who understood the complexities of leaving behind expectations to embrace authenticity. Emily saw the lightness in his steps, the subtle confidence in his voice, and it brought a warmth to her heart that words could not fully capture. One crisp afternoon, Michael invited Emily to a small cafe downtown, a cozy place filled with mismatched chairs and shelves lined with well-loved books. Over steaming cups of tea, he shared the progress he made on a story inspired by his own experiences, an honest, unflinching exploration of love, loss, and the search for self. This story is different, he told her, eyes shining. It's not about what I thought I should be. It's about who I am. Emily listened, pride swelling quietly within her. That's the story worth telling. As the seasons changed, so did the relationships once strained by fear and misunderstanding. Sarah and Michael exchanged letters and occasional calls, slowly rebuilding a foundation of respect and empathy. It was not the love they had once envisioned, but something perhaps more enduring, a friendship rooted in truth and forgiveness. One evening, as snowflakes drifted softly outside the window, Emily found a note tucked inside the box with the family veil. The handwriting was delicate and familiar. Thank you for holding on to this until I am ready. I promise when the time comes, I will wear it with all the love it deserves. Michael had left a note, a promise not just to the past, but to the future. Emily smiled, the tears she wiped away warm with hope. In that moment, she understood something profound. That love was not about perfect moments or flawless traditions. It was about the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to forgive, and the grace to embrace change. The veil would wait, patient and silent, for a heart ready to carry it, not because of duty or expectation, but because of genuine love. As Emily closed the closet door softly, she felt the weight of years lift from her shoulders. The journey had been long and winding, marked by pain and discovery, but it had led them to this, a new beginning. Outside, the world lay quiet under a blanket of snow, and inside, a family healed, ready to face whatever came next together. The porch light flickered one last time before steadying, a beacon of love's enduring light in the darkest of nights. And with that, the story found its peace.